Welcome everybody to another Meet Success. This evening we are talking to Noman, who's a project scheduler. How are you going, Noman?
I'm good. How are you? Hello,
I'm very well. So people are still coming in. We've got quite a few already. So we might kick off. We'll come back to Noman in a moment and find out a little bit more about his story and ask a few questions. I'm just going to take you through a couple of things first to make sure that you are all clear about how to function in the webinar this evening. So you'll see you have a control panel. If you want to ask a question, simply type your question in the question box and click send or press enter. If you want to reduce the size of your control panel, click on the arrow inside the orange box and this will reduce it to the toolbar. Then if you want to post a question, simply click on the arrow again and it will expand to your full control panel. So I encourage you all to post questions, and if you can do that anytime during the evening, I'll be looking up and to see who's asking what, and I'll be asking as they come through. We might leave them to a relevant point, but please ask as many questions as you like. So back to Noman. How are you, Noman?
I'm good. What about you?
I'm very well. So maybe we can just kick off by telling me a little bit about yourself.
I'm an engineer by profession, and I have done my engineering in materials back in 2008 from Pakistan. After engineering, I have done in the steel projects. I have worked on the LNG project. I have worked in the power plant project, and now I'm working with the metro project.
So just do LNG, power, and what are you doing now?
The city trains. They have their project called Sydney Metro.
Okay, so trains. You're working on trains at the moment, yeah?
Yeah, I'm working on the trains.
Excellent. Okay. All right. And when did you arrive in Australia?
I came here back in April 2017. So it's like 6 or 7 months years in Australia.
Yep, 7 months. Okay.
Yeah.
And for those people who are looking for their first job, how did you find your first job?
I found my first job through Seek because initially when came here, I got a call from few recruiters and they were asking like how much you are willing to get, what is your experience and all these things. Actually, the first thing which I have to know when I came here is the job market and the salary market, how much they are offering. So when in Pakistan, I was going through the Robert Walter website and they were doing some stats like how much the engineer is earning and all these things. So that thing was in my mind, and whenever a recruiter called me and he was asking what are you expecting, I was like, just give me $120,000 a year, a little bit negotiable. So the next question recruiter asked me, do you have the local experience? I said no. And they said, okay, we will call you back. And then they never came back. After it, some of my friends gave me career reference and said he's a well-known person for getting job or making a resume for the overseas international. And one of my friends strongly recommended that he got a job in the next 2 months or something after making the resume with you and all this.
Okay,
so I got the
yeah. So you
I
came
got the job.
you came to OBP
Sorry.
Australia through a referral, is that correct?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So just to summarize that, you initially didn't find much success going through recruiters, was that right?
Yes.
So the job that you did get, was that through a direct application?
Yes, it was a direct application. Like I got two jobs. This is my second job in Sydney Trains, and I got first job. I applied it through Seek again, and I had a direct interview. No recruiters in between. Even I had a conversation with a recruiter, like, and he told me that you have a good experience, you have a good qualification, everything is according to us, but you don't know the local market and you don't know the local engineering knowledge. And my point to him was like, the codes and standards which you're using in the engineering are the same, which is using internationally worldwide. Australian standards are not different with American standards because American standards drive everything. So they said no, still you don't have the local experience. So I said, how can I convince you? Like the standards are standards. Standards are everywhere, same in the world. Like so,
I think I've lost you, Noman. You might come back in a moment. So yeah, I've lost your audio there. You do have a bit of a data dropout. So just to, this is a common predicament people have with the no local experience. Why do you think recruiters often say this, but when you actually contact companies directly, they don't seem to have as much of an issue with the fact that you don't have local experience? Looks like we have a bit of a data problem with Noman. Did you get that question, Noman?
can you hear me?
I can hear you now. We seem to be losing you every now and then. Just the question, why do you think recruiters have an issue with no local experience but employers not?
There are various reasons. One of the reason is the recruiters usually go with line by line by the job description. Like if they said you have to. Hello.
Yeah, we're losing you, Norman. Just have to do our best. Can you repeat that, please? We didn't get any of that. Sorry.
Okay. Now, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. There are various reasons. One of the reason is the recruiter always go like line by line with the job description, what he clients need. If you try to convince him, same thing like the engineering codes are always followed here in Australia or anywhere in the world are standard and which was driven usually by the American standards. So they said, no, you have to have experience in the Australian standards and all these things. So while the direct employer who has the working knowledge of the thing, like what he wants to get done by us, he always understands the things like one of the guy previously which I was working for him, he's also an engineer. So whatever I was telling him, this engineering code refer to this thing, this engineering code refer to this thing, he understands. And he said, like, you have the working knowledge. So this is the technical difference. Like the direct person who is hiring have some technical knowledge. They understand our language, especially the engineers, while the recruiters don't, because they are not familiar with the engineering codes and all these things. That's the biggest issue.
Yep. Good. Okay. So this is a really, really important point because it's one of the main barriers for overseas born professionals is that people persist with only approaching recruiters, and as Noman said, they don't understand you. They are not from your profession, so they only have words to go by, a job description. That's the only thing. Yeah. Sorry, you had more, Noman? Anything else to add there?
No. Second thing is if you go to the recruiter might more reluctant with the if you go to the direct employer sometimes have some reluctance with the recruiters because recruiter charges them extra amount which they don't want to pay.
Yes.
So if you go to the direct employer, so they understand you, they have something like they can save some amount of money and all these things. So yes.
Great. So there's two reasons. Is there any other reason why a direct approach is good?
No, as such, no.
Okay, so just to reiterate, the first one being that you need to talk to people who understand your resume and you as a professional, and the second one being that you are more expensive if you go through a recruiter, more expensive for the employer, that is. Okay, thanks for that. Just give us a rundown on what you do on a daily basis at the moment in your current job.
We are making the schedules for the construction works, and Sydney Trains have different projects here in Sydney, and so usually I make the schedule on the Primavera. I load resources on it, so we track out the progress and making the work front for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depends. So this is my job description.
Yep. And had you done something similar before this job? I mean, I know you've done scheduling before, but on similar projects, or is this completely new?
Actually, Terry, the project planning is same everywhere. Actually, the only difference is of industry. Like I work in the LNG, we used to make the work front for the people. Similarly, the power plants and all these things, same work we are doing here. Only difference is the terminology they are using in the industry. For example, in LNG industry, we usually talking about the piping things. Here we are talking about the electrical signaling, civil works, tracks works. So there are some acronyms which are different. Rest of the things are same software, same strategy.
So did it take you much time to become familiar with the new language, the new acronyms, the jargon?
Yeah, whenever you start a new job, it will take like 2 or 3 weeks to understand the process and all these things. Then you become familiar. So yeah, it takes me 2 or 3 weeks to familiar with the system, with acronyms and all these things. But now I am into the field. Like I am making the schedules for them.
Excellent. Okay, so if you have any questions for Noman, please post them through, type them in, and I'll read them out as they come through. So a lot of the people listening this evening are looking for their first break in their profession. What advice would you give to someone trying to break into the profession in Australia?
Never do so. Keep trying and search for the relevant people in the LinkedIn and try to do as more networking as you can. Like before getting a job in Sydney Trains, I have 5 or 10 people working in the Sydney Trains on my LinkedIn profile. Similarly, I have an interview, and as I was, it was in the PM Partners. Here's a Primera professional consultancy firm, and I add their director, and his director saw my profile on the LinkedIn, and the next day I got a call from the human resource person, and said, our director want us to get you interviewed by their planning persons and all this because according to them you will be useful for them. But it was a general interview and my first interview, and it was not successful because they said actually our director asked us to take your interview, so we are taking your interview, but we don't need any positions right now.
Right.
So whenever we have position in the future, then we will call you back.
So you think that that initial interview may have actually been prompted by the fact that you were quite connected with the company already through several people?
Yes.
That's great. That's really, really useful advice to give people. How did you go about connecting with these people on LinkedIn initially?
Whenever I want to connect someone, first I study their profile. What are they? What work they have done? And what qualifications they have? What experience they have? And then I send a message to them that I saw your profile and this is useful things. Please suggest some good things which I can improve in myself because you are much more experienced and all these things. So whenever, like if I send you a friend the request on the LinkedIn, I'm telling you that I need help from you and all these things. So obviously you have something that the person is connecting me, have something in my mind to ask or something. So you always do the message when you connect someone on the LinkedIn, either ask for some advice or for some suggestion.
That's great. I mean, advice is free as well. So a lot of people are willing to give that advice because you're not actually saying, "Can I have a job?" You're just
Obviously.
you're talking about other things, and it's less threatening for that person if you're simply asking for advice. So that's an excellent suggestion there. So if you're just joining us, a few people have just popped in this last 2 minutes. We're talking to Noman, and so far he's talked about the advantages of going directly to a company and not just relying on recruiters. He's a scheduler. He's talked about the difference between working in LNG to construction in the transport industry. And now we're talking about the use of LinkedIn to establish connections within a company to get some sort of common thread when you do actually apply for a job with that company. Okay, that's great. Thinking back a little bit, Noman, you've been here for 7 months. Let's think back maybe a year or 2 years ago. What did you know about Australia before you came?
Uh, some of my friends came from the Australia, like in Pakistan. Reason for their coming, they said like their iron ore industry.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Just apologies there. Some people may have missed that start. We're going to just catch up with Noman now. We're saying, what did you know about Australia before you came?
Some of my friends came back from Australia to Pakistan, and they said their mining industries are in great fall because iron ore prices fall everywhere, oil prices fall down. So they said there are a lot of the unemployment in Australia, especially in the Perth and all these region, which have the mining industries. So I said, okay, let's try. When I applied for the Australia, and I was searching the job on the LinkedIn. Every day I saw one or two job posted on the Seek and all these things. So uh, I said, one of my friend even told me first you get a job and then go there in Australia. It will be useful for or helpful for you. And I said, okay, let's try, go there, and then search a job there. If it's in luck, I will get it, and if it's not, then I will do some odd job.
Did you have to do an odd job when you arrived?
Yes, I did initially for 2 months, 2.5 months,
Excellent. Okay.
because
Yep, go ahead. Sorry.
when I came here, I bring some of my saving, which didn't last for much, like more than a month, and then I have to do some odd jobs.
Excellent. Okay. Okay, so a few more people have just arrived in. Some of you may have missed the start. This has been recorded, okay, so you can catch the start if you've missed it. Just to recap, so far Noman has talked about the advantage of going directly to companies and not just using recruiters, because companies know you as a professional, whereas recruiters don't have that background knowledge, the profession-specific knowledge. Noman is a scheduler. He's moved from LNG into transport construction and talked a little bit about the differences between the two and learning on the job. Also about the advantages of using LinkedIn to get some leverage and get connections within companies that you may apply for jobs within at some stage. Okay, so if you want to ask questions, please post questions and I'll throw them up to Noman and we'll answer them as we go. So how did you choose which city to live in, Noman?
Uh, my plan was to settle in either in Perth or Melbourne, but my friend who came with me insisted me to stay in the Sydney. So this is the only reason to come in the Sydney, nothing else.
Okay, and you're enjoying it in Sydney?
Yeah.
Excellent. Before you came, how much research did you do on finding a job and how to go about that process? And how did that prior knowledge compare with the actual reality of trying to find work when you got here?
Okay. I will search on the Seek and sometimes on the LinkedIn, and I applied, and then the recruiters send me an email, please give us your local contact number, or so that we can arrange your interview. And I was like, I don't have the local number now, but I will give you, and I'm planning to move in Australia. So they said, okay, when you come here, then ask us or contact us, then we will get back to you. And when I came here, I saw the things are totally different. Like the resume which we use in the Pakistan are not relevant to the Australian standards, because in Australia the resume style is totally different. They always go through your resume with the software. In Pakistan, we don't have, like, we always made the lengthy CV. The more pages you have in your CV, the gooder resume you have. But here they are like the shortest resume you have, it's good enough for you. So you have to be very specific, to the point, and always your job resume contains the requirements of the job, or the words or the keywords from the job description, so that it will be easier for the software to pick out your resume.
Excellent, great advice. Himanshu has just asked a question we have sort of covered, but I'll just throw it to you again. How do you employ LinkedIn to the maximum for networking and for job search and closing therefrom? I think we've lost you again, Noman. It does seem to come back, but not quite sure. Hello. The question was how. The question was, how do you use LinkedIn for the maximum effect? What is the best way to use LinkedIn?
Professionals, like for example, if I'm talking about me, I always search for the project professionals guys, project management professionals, and who are working in the industry. So they in Australia, they will give you some professionals working in the Melbourne. And if you are in the Sydney, so it's not relevant for you, because if they recommend some job for you, so Melbourne, the person who is needed in the Melbourne didn't took the interview of the guy who is in Sydney, because it's difficult for them to carry on the process. So better in which city you are, you have to be very specific and search for the relevant person, because in project management field there are persons who are working in the IT industry, and there are persons who are working in the construction industry. So the IT professionals never help you out in finding the construction industry job.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay, we seem to be having a little problem with your internet connection there, Noman. I'm not quite sure what's going on. We will persist, and hopefully you can hear us, but I'll ask the next question. Okay, so Irfan has a question. How is the scheduling market? What tools are used mostly, Primavera or MS Project or other? And how much advanced knowledge of these scheduling tools should one have to land quickly on a job?
In here in Sydney, people are mostly work on the Primavera P6, and the most popular version is version 8.3. People are making the schedules on the WBS, and if you're talking about the advanced Primavera, so they are measuring the progress on the resource loading. So if you know about the resource loading, earned value management, cost management in the Primavera, so you are good enough to get a job. And even the Primavera, it's mostly company have the Primavera in their system for monitoring the project progress.
Okay. And generally, how's the market? Are there lots of jobs at the moment, or is it hard?
Yes, yes, there are lots of jobs. Like when I got the job in the Sydney train, I have an offer from Sydney Water. I was doing the existing job in the transmission line construction company, and I got another job from the ERP implementation company for doing the project management.
Okay. People should be aware that there are major infrastructure projects going on all over Australia. So employment in construction and peripheral areas is strong at the moment. So it's a good time to be applying for those jobs. Okay, we have another
Yes.
question. Another question from Nya Wang. Is taking a work sabbatical for a period of 2 years seen as a disadvantage to a new employment in a new place? So a 2 year break. What do you think about that, Noman?
Like I have around before getting a job, like so if you're good in your field and you're updated with the market, what is going on in the market or which software they are using and all these things, so you can get a job. 2 years is not an issue, like, but you have to prove your employer that you are good enough for them. That's the only thing which works in the market.
Yeah, okay. We're losing you quite a bit, Noman. It's quite difficult to hear what you're saying, but I'll try to just pick up on little bits of pieces that we can add to it. I think you need to explain what you've been doing in those 2 years. A gap of 2 years without any explanation can cause issues. So whether it's through the cover letter, the email, or in the summary at the top, somewhere you need to explain what's been happening for the 2 years. Yeah. Okay, let's move on and let's have a look. Please post questions. Any more questions, keep them coming through. Um, Thinking back to your first week in Australia, Noman, how did you feel in your first week? How would you describe that experience?
My friends who are here, they said in the first 2 weeks you have to enjoy, leave everything and go out for visiting place, do enjoyment. Once you get a job, you will not get time for your own personal activities. So in the first 2 weeks, I just visit here and there, go to the beaches, went to Sydney Harbor, all these things. So I just enjoy the first 2 weeks.
Right, okay. That must be hard to do because there's also a bit of pressure to get the income and get the money flowing in, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, good. Let's move on to a next question. So how long did it take before you actually landed your first job? How many months are we talking about?
It's the 4 months.
4 months.
Like I came here in April and I got job in August.
Yep, okay. That's not bad. Okay. Um, Now, we talked a little bit about recruiters' direct application and expressions of interest. Let's move on. We've already done that one. You had a survival job. Okay, you haven't been here for a whole year, but let's just pick up on maybe 2 or 3 things that you've learnt in your first year in Australia. So it could be about culture, your industry, the country in general. Do you have anything to share?
Uh, the culture is totally different. Like for the especially for the foreigners who came here, and most of the people are coming from the Asian region. So we have a little bit hesitation, and here everything is just straightforward, say it and in a polite manner. So the culture is more straightforward, and things are in a little bit humorous mode, not the serious one. There are a lot of industries, and if you have good work skills to get a job, or so you can get a job because there, if we see the Sydney trains plan till 2032, so there are lots and lots of construction goings on, like in lot of major projects. And if you see the Sydney Metro here, M5 extension, and there's another project which is connecting the Melbourne and the Sydney. So there are a lot of projects going on. So it's a good chance, or it's the starting season for getting the boom cycle.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, so a good time to be looking for work because even in construction, there are spin-offs in other professions as well. You don't have to be a civil engineer or somebody who's involved in the construction side of things. There
Yes.
are administration, IT, all the things that go along with this are required as well, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. Let's move on. People talk about fitting in. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like you fit in?
Uh, I don't think so. Like, uh, if you have good skills, or like if I'm talking about myself by profession, I am a materials engineer, but I work for the project management since I started my first job. So, like, it's depend on your skills, how much you do things, and yeah, it depends.
Well, what about the more personal interaction side of fitting in, in the workplace? Humor, talking to people about non-work related things. How does that work for you? Is it taking some time? Is it difficult?
Not much because my boss used to tell me uh, two people have the most networking power, one who drinks, one who smokes. So I usually don't drink, but I smoke. So like when you go out for the smoke, you always find your office mates over there, so you interact with them, do smoking with them. Like even in breaks, you ask them, let's go out. So you start talking about the things, like, so I think it's good in the networking thing.
Yep.
Networking always works out.
Okay. Now Wang has asked another question. Most of the jobs ask for local work experience in Australia. We've touched on this a little bit. How can a migrant with many years of work experience overseas convince recruiters and employers to waive off this requirement?
I worked for 8.5 years overseas, like in Pakistan, and I had the total. I have 5 interviews, and 4 out of 5, the first one was recommended by the director. The remaining 4, I qualified for the interview, all the interviews, and they were asking me to come and join their job. The first job I got, it's totally about your relevant experience. Like if you convince the direct employer who wants to hire you, then they will hire you because like even in city trains, I don't have the local experience. I got the first job in transmission line construction company. I don't have the relevant experience. Even in IT, ERP, they were implementing the ERP system in Sydney Waters. And when I gave the interview to them, the next day they said, just join us. I said, I cannot join you. And they were like, we can give you $600 per day. Even they were agreed to give me $700 per day. And I don't have the relevant experience even in the IT, but I have the experience of the project management. So the thing is, I just convinced them how to do the project management for the ERP implementation. And this is because of my relevant experience, which I did in Pakistan, not in Australia. So if you have the power to convince the recruiter, then you can get a job. It does not matter you have the local experience or not.
Yeah, I think that's really important. It's more about relevant experience. And sometimes there are things that you do need to know about the local scene. So, for example, if you're an accountant and you don't have an understanding of Australian tax and law, and you're not aware of business activity statements or GST, these can be barriers. But it's not about not like having local experience. It's about your lack of understanding of these things, so you can get that information. Similarly,
Yes,
for
true.
HVAC roles and building services, often they want you to understand the national codes, construction codes. So if you don't know anything about that, it can be difficult to convince an employer or a recruiter. But again, it's not the no local experience. It's, as Noman said, it's you have to show relevant experience. I think sometimes people so frequently told by recruiters that you need local experience that they accept that as being true. Okay, and it's clearly not, because the the vast majority of people, more than 90% of people who come to Australia, never get local experience until their first job. So people do find work. It's a multicultural environment. Engineers Australia have released statistics to show that I think it's almost 3/4 of engineers working in Australia were not born in Australia. Okay, so we draw a large amount of our engineers from overseas. So it's not unusual, and there are thousands of people working here who never had local experience when they got their first job. Okay, Irfan has another one. Since you are an engineer but working as a scheduler, how different is it from working as an actual engineer?
I did some work in the field as well. Like even in scheduler, you always plan things. You have to have an understanding if they are doing some construction works, how long will it take? So if you work on the field and then you plan it, so it will be more easier for you to plan your work. Every day you learn a new thing. Every day you are modifying the things, you are rectifying the things. And when you come in front of the computer, so you always miss the field.
So is it typical for the scheduler to be an engineer, or do you get most schedulers who are not engineers?
Uh, I think it is because, or maybe the person who work on the industry and he know how the things work. So he can do it, but usually engineers have the good understanding how the construction works goes on. They know about the codes, standards, and by working on the field, they know how long will it take to complete the job. So it will be easier for them to estimate the time, to estimate resources, how much resources they need to complete a job. So I think most of the engineers are the good planners as well. But
Yep. Good. Okay.
the other person is the software operator. If he's doing the scheduling and he don't know and he always take the inputs from the other person. So it's just a system of that.
Okay, good. What about the interview process? Go back, you've had a couple of interviews at least. How would you describe the process, and was there anything you found difficult?
I gave here 4 interviews. Out of 4, the hardest one was with the Sydney trains. And initially, when I went there, they said, okay, introduce about yourself. And then they give me the keyboard mouse and said, okay, we have some things, some practical things which you have to do. So like they did some scheduling things in front of them. They have around 11 questions which they want me to do in the system. And after this, they have a panel for 3%. One person asks a question, and then there's a cross questions from remaining 3%. So even in the city trains, I had my time was scheduled for 45 minutes, and interview was ended up in an hour time. So like it was an interesting conversation, but they have some technical questions like how you respond to things, what will you do, which type of scheduling you have done, what are the maximum activity schedule which you made, how you load the resources, how you measure the progress. So how you import export activities from one system to another one, from Primavera to SAP, from SAP to Primavera, what is the linkage between them? Have you worked on the client version? Have you worked on the standalone version? So there are different questions which they asked me.
So highly technical though, were they all?
Like 75% or 70% questions are technical. The remaining 30% questions were about your personality and some administrative stuff. What have you done? How you manage teams and management stuff, all these things.
Okay, good.
So
So the test must have been quite challenging to be put on the spot to solve problems.
Yes,
Yeah, good.
like they are asking the questions, and I was doing like it's easy thing for me. Like even if I had an interview with the Sydney trains, the Sydney Water, the ERP implementation firm. It was interview on the coffee shop. We were having coffee. We were discussing things, and I was telling him like what I have done for the other projects, how I created the links, single activity. Like if someone comes to you and say, "What is the variance?" These activities. So yeah, I had a good interviews here.
Sure. Okay, we might have a couple more questions and then we might finish off. So if you have any more questions, please post them and I can ask Noman. So, how would you describe the Australian workplace culture, at least in the jobs you've had? So, how does it compare to, say, working in Pakistan? And so, for example, the management style, the formality, the way you interact with your colleagues.
Life balance in Pakistan, like I used to work for 10, 11 hours a day. And when we were on the project, I used to work for 48 hours a day. Some
Yeah, we're losing you, Noman. We might finish up here actually. It seems to be getting worse, the connection. So, unfortunately, we've had quite a bit of technical problems this evening, but thank you for that anyway. So, you're just finishing up there. You said the work life balance, and you said one other thing I missed.
in Pakistan, I used to work for the longest hours, like 16, 17 hours a day.
Mm.
So here in Australia, more focus on the work-life balance, more focus on the family things, go and spend time with your family. So this is the difference which I feel here.
Excellent. Okay, we might wind it up, and thank you, Noman, for joining us this evening. You've been very helpful and informative. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. You're
And
welcome, Terry.
no problems. And we are saying goodbye to everybody else. So this is the last webinar for this year, and we'll be back again next year. If anybody's interested in finding out more about how to find work in Australia, please contact us at obpaustralia.com.au. And people are saying bye, thanks, and thank you for joining us. So good night, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.